Yo, what's up, everybody? RageGage20 here, back with another Mr. B story. Mr. Ballen here. Today we have Paranormal Event with Proof. I think it's called something like the checkerboard or something like that. I don't know where I saw a glimpse of that. I think maybe it was a thumbnail of someone else who did a reaction to it or whatnot. The, sliding thumbnail thing. Yeah, looks cool. I saw hashtag Canada because it's Canadian, and I heard it was like 1967 for the first second or two that Mr. B was talking. So I don't know. What grosses me out, I don't know if it's body hair or what, but the thumbnail, every time I look at it, really grosses me out because it looks like each, and I hope this is not the case, each checkerboard pattern. I'll do it up here. It's not where it is, but just so you can see. It looks like it has like string coming out of it that's like attached to his hand or something. He's like pulling like his flesh or something. It looks fucking disgusting. He's probably just moving, like scratching it or something, and it looks like his flesh is moving down. It's just bending down his stomach or whatnot. And it's probably not actually, but it looks like that's what it is, and it really grosses me out. But we'll see if that is the case. I have no guesses. It says paranormal. I was thinking aliens, but that's not paranormal. That's extraterrestrial. So I guess it's not aliens. That would have been my guess of an alien abduction. But you have no idea what. Maybe some ghosts were just really bored and wanted to play a game of checkers or something, or chess or something. That's all I got. So let's find out what really happened back in the 60s.
In 1967, a man was digging for gold in a forest in Canada when behind him he heard this sudden commotion. It sounded like geese getting really startled and flying off in different directions. And so he put down his pickaxe, he stood up, he turned around, and what he claimed happened next is referred to as the Falcon Lake incident, and it's considered to be one of the most credible paranormal stories of all time. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please ask the like button if you can borrow their favorite DVD, but instead of watching it, use it as a frisbee with your dog, and then return it. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
I was gonna say I thought I was gonna say tape over it with like a shitty movie or something, and no examples of what a shitty movie you could say came to mind. I was like, I don't know, I'll think of one. I'll get back to you. I thought that's what I was gonna say.
Just before 11 p.m. at night on May 20th, 1967, a 50-year-old man named Stefan McCulloch staggered into the Misericordia Hospital in Winnipeg, Canada. Stefan was so physically weak that his oldest son, Mark, was there with him, physically holding him up, carrying him into the hospital. When the nurses at the front desk saw the pair walk in, they immediately got up and walked around their desk over to these two guys and said, "Hey, what's going on? What's wrong with him?" And so Stefan at this point is so uncomfortable he can barely talk. But he takes a deep breath and then he tells the nurses that earlier that day he had been burned on his chest and stomach, and now he had this blinding headache and he was so nauseous and he could barely walk. The nurses knew clearly this is an emergency, and so they quickly ushered the pair down the hall to an exam room, and then a couple of minutes later, doctors came into the room and they asked Stefan to show them his burns. Stefan, who was already lying on his back on the exam table, slowly reaches down and grabs the bottom of his shirt and he lifts it up, and the doctors are stunned at what they see on his stomach. There was a very strange burn pattern that none of them had seen before.
See, it looks like these are all attached to strings or something, and it's being pulled by his finger, like it's like dragging the flesh this way. It's weird. Gross.
And so the doctors, they move in to get a better look at his injury, and as they're staring at it, they ask Stefan to explain how he got this burn. Now, what the doctors didn't realize is that Stefan was very conflicted. He knew if he told the truth about how he got this burn, then he would open himself and his family up to ridicule and skepticism.
Right.
But as he's laying there and the doctors are waiting for his answer, he finally decides that the right thing to do here is just tell the truth. And so he takes a deep breath and then tells the doctors what happened to him. And by the time he was finished telling this story of what happened to his stomach, the doctors had stopped looking at his injury and instead were just standing in the middle of the room staring at Stefan with eyes wide and their mouths open. They were all literally speechless. Within 24 hours, Stefan's story had made news all over the world,
Right.
and his story had attracted the attention of numerous US and Canadian secretive government agencies who were keen to interview Stefan one-on-one to really find out what he knew. In short, what Stefan claimed happened to him, dubbed the Falcon Lake incident, was a very big deal. However, the farther this story went and the more people that heard it, the more people started to question the validity of this story. It just seemed too unbelievable that maybe Stefan is just lying or this is a hoax. And so before I tell you Stefan's actual account of what happened at Falcon Lake, I'm going to give you a little context about who Stefan was prior to the incident. Because ultimately, Stefan's credibility in your eyes will determine if you really believe what happened to him. Stefan was born in the early 20th century in Poland, and when World War II broke out, he was captured by the Nazis and put into one of their concentration camps. It was called the Gross Rosen camp, and it was located in Poland. During his time at that camp, Stefan would bear witness to the Nazis perpetrating some of the worst atrocities ever committed against humanity. In total, approximately 125,000 people were held prisoner at the Gross Rosen camp, including Stefan. And of those 125,000, 40,000 of them would be killed, primarily on site at the camp, or on a Nazi-led death march. After the camp was...
So, something he didn't mention that's got me questioning something here. Was he Jewish? Did the Nazis put people who... I mean, I imagine they just assumed someone was Jewish, even if they weren't. And they're like, no, I'm not Jewish. And they're like, bullshit, you're lying, and probably threw them in there anyways. But weren't those camps specifically designed for Jewish people? Would they take... I guess the only situation I could think of where they would take someone who isn't Jewish is if they thought they were lying. Which might be the case, or maybe he was Jewish, I don't know. Yeah, no, definitely atrocities and war crimes like crazy. Yeah, no, nothing but horrible shit was happening up in there.
Finally liberated in early 1945, Stefan worked as a translator for the US Army, helping them continue to liberate other concentration camps across Europe. But by 1946, Stefan was ready to leave Europe and start a new life somewhere else and put World War II behind him. And so he and his wife, who also was held in a concentration camp during World War II, fled Poland with their 3 young kids and resettled in Winnipeg, Canada. And for the next 20 years, the McCullochs lived a very peaceful life. Stefan would find work as a mechanic at a cement factory, and his wife and his kids would make many friends and fall in love with the Winnipeg community.
I mean, honestly, like, no joke, no flame, no no trolling. Honestly, I haven't spent a lot of time in Canada. I've just been up to Edmonton and Banff, which is just fucking a great name in general. There's a beautiful town up in there that I went to and had some of the most bomb Indian food ever, man. It was so fucking good. Oh, so good. But honestly, Canada is like a very beautiful place. Even without spending a lot of time there, it's a very beautiful place to settle down at. Like I don't know if it was just a preconceived notion going there, or if it really was the vibe difference between being in the U.S. all my life and visiting Canada. But people just didn't seem angry and hateful in Canada, which you just get that feeling. Like you don't realize you have that's your perception of where you're living, like in the US, until you leave the US, and it's just like everyone seems happy here. Like, am I just imagining that? Is everyone happier? So yeah, Canada would actually be a wonderful place to settle down at. Just, I'll throw that one out there.
However, the McCulloch's life would take a sudden turn for the worst on May 20th, 1967. That was the day of the Falcon Lake incident. Stefan was a very passionate amateur prospector. A prospector is someone who searches the earth for mineral deposits, usually gold or silver. Stefan would spend much of his off time traveling all over Canada to different wilderness areas to basically hike around the forests and up over the mountains, stopping to hack into the earth with his pickaxe in hope of discovering treasures underneath the surface. Now, Stefan almost never found any treasures on any of his prospecting journeys, but he wasn't really in prospecting for the riches.
Right.
Stefan just loved being outdoors and being in nature. It was very calming and peaceful for him, and considering how traumatic his earlier life had been, being in the concentration camp during World War II, finding moments of peace in his life was very important to him. And so, in May of 1967, Stefan decided to go out on another one of his prospecting trips, this time to an area called Falcon Lake. Falcon Lake is a fairly large lake located about 100 miles to the east of Winnipeg, and surrounding this lake was a big forest that Stefan had heard contained silver deposits tucked away in the hillsides. And so on Friday, May 19th, Stefan was ready to go on this trip, and so he packed up all of his prospecting equipment, he said goodbye to his wife and his kids, and then he left the house and made his way to the bus stop where he hopped on a Greyhound bus. 2 hours later, he got off the bus at the stop closest to Falcon Lake, and from there, he made his way to this cheap motel that was right on the side of the highway. He got a room, he got a quick bite to eat in their cafe, and then returned to his room and went to bed. The next morning, May 20th, 1967, so the day of the Falcon Lake incident, Stefan woke up early, right around 5 a.m. And by 5:30 a.m., he had all of his equipment either in his backpack or on his belt, and he was making his way out of the motel's front doors. Right outside of this motel was the highway that ran left to right, and on the other side of that highway was this huge forest that Falcon Lake was deep inside of. And so after Stefan left the motel, he crossed over that highway and began walking into the woods. And for the next several hours, Stefan just kind of meandered.
So if you're wondering what I'm looking for, I keep peering around. I don't know if that was in the video. Same thing happened in the last video that I just recorded like a few minutes ago. I heard a sound. I realized the sound wasn't in the actual video. It was just in my room. It was a weird clunking sound or some shit. And I just heard a sound. And I was like, was that the sound that Mr. B put in to represent the bus? Or did that happen out here again? So I'm just paranoid now, looking around, make sure someone ain't trying to like sneak in somewhere. They shouldn't be here or something. Anywho.
His way through the woods. He wasn't on a trail. He was just using his compass to make sure he was generally walking in the direction of Falcon Lake. At around 9 a.m., so he's been hiking now for several hours, he looked up ahead and he saw there was a clearing on the side of this hill. And so Stefan walked into this clearing, and two things became immediately apparent. One, he was right near Falcon Lake. From his perspective on this clearing, he could look down just a couple of 100 feet, and there was the lake. And two, the reason this clearing existed and why no trees were growing on it at all is because under his feet was just a huge rock face, like a quartz vein that was running across this hillside. And so this was like the perfect place for Stefan to begin prospecting.
Wow.
And so he set his things down, he got out his pickaxe, he got his welding gloves on, he put on his welding goggles as well. They protected his eyes from any rocks that were flying as he was hacking into the ground.
Wow.
And then he got to work. For the next couple of hours, Stefan very diligently hacked away at this big rock, but he didn't find any silver or anything else of note. And so around 11 a.m., Stefan was hungry and tired, and so he put his pickaxe down, he took his goggles off, he took his gloves off, and he sat down on this rock facing the lake to have some lunch. And as he sat there enjoying his food, all he could hear in the distance were the sound of a few geese down on the lake making some noise, but other than that, it was totally quiet. After he was done eating, he put his gear back on and got back to work. About an hour later, at around 12:15 p.m., Stefan was still hacking away at the rock when, despite all the noise he was making as he smashed the ground with his pickaxe, he could hear a really loud commotion coming from behind him. And it turned out when he stopped the pickaxe, the commotion sounded like geese honking and going wild. And so he dropped his pickaxe, he took his goggles, put them up on his forehead, and then he stood up and he turned around and he looked down towards the lake where he heard all these geese going crazy.
Right.
And the first thing he noticed was there were some geese on the lake that appeared to be flying off in different directions like they had been startled. But what really immediately caught his attention was not the geese, but what had very likely startled the geese. And that was two bright, glowing red objects that were flying slowly across the lake towards him, kind of roughly over where the geese were.
UFO? I'm sure they weren't like in the sky and they weren't that big, but UFO? That's what I'm saying. Oh, okay. That's a good place.
Yesterday, my pet frog, Seagull Lung, and I went to the frog park. And as I watched old
Seagull
Lungy
Lung?
gallop over to his other frog friends to join their game of
Jesus.
Mr. Ballen,
NordVPN, man, I swear to fuck.
or click the link in the description below. Okay, back to the story.
Still 16 minutes to the last story. I'm excited.
And now these objects, they were cylindrical. They appeared to be about maybe 30 or 40 feet wide. They didn't have any sort of emission coming off of them. They weren't making any noise. They were just kind of slowly making their way over towards where Stefan was. Now, as Stefan is watching this happen, he wasn't fearful. He assumed those have to be military aircraft. As it was, this part of Canada, Falcon Lake, is very remote. There's not many people around.
Right.
And so logically, it made sense that perhaps there's a military that's doing training exercises in this area. And so feeling much more intrigued than fearful,
Right.
Stefan just continued to watch as these red aircraft got closer and closer to his side.
Oh, what else are you gonna do? Like, maybe... I don't know. Like, maybe you hide behind like a tree or something, kind of try to watch from underneath or something, but they come towards you, they probably already seen you. I would just probably grab the pickaxe and be like, just in case.
Side of the lake. And then when these two craft were about 200 feet away from where Stefan was standing, they came to a stop and they were just hovering in the air. And then one of the craft suddenly turned orange and began going up into the clouds, and then at some point just vanished. And then the other craft, instead of going up, just continued descending very slowly, now very clearly towards this open rock face that Stefan was standing on. Now again, Stefan was totally convinced that these were military aircraft, conducting some sort of exercise.
In the 60s? I mean, I don't got a good description or visual of what they look like, but just it sounds like it may be too advanced for what you would expect the military to ever be capable of back in the 60s. But then again, there's always that, like, yeah, it's fine. See this in the background, just like make sure it's not somebody, right? Okay, we good? Okay, cool. Oh, paranoid shit. Like, of course, we always assume that at every step of history, the government has way more advanced of shit than we know that they have. So, like, I could see that, but like, I don't know, man. If the government is sending out special state of the line, never before seen aircraft to find you, because it looks like they're coming for you out in the middle of the woods, like, that's probably also not good for you. It's probably not there to say hi, but like in that situation, I don't really think you're running that situation either. I mean, like, what are you gonna do? Outrun the military? I don't think so. So it's like pretty much like, oh, let's see what they want. Like, hopefully it's not like, you're going missing, buddy. You just thought you were gonna come out here and break up our rocks? Nah, we're taking you out of here. Like, this is our it's our territory. I don't know. I'm sure these aliens, I think they're aliens, are just pissed off that he was breaking up their special UFO rocks. I think that's what that was. Pretty sure that's what this is.
And so he's not fearful. He is just intrigued by what he's seeing. And in fact, by this point, he had convinced himself that this second aircraft that was now coming down to land on these rocks must have experienced some sort of issue, and they were landing in order to fix it. And Stefan even thought to himself, well, hey, I'm a mechanic. Maybe I can help the pilot or pilots with whatever's going on with their craft. Once the craft finally did touch down on the rocks about 150 feet away from Stefan, it changed colors from red to stainless steel with an orange glow around the outside of the aircraft. And inside of this craft, a really bright purple light came on that Stefan was only aware of because there was a couple of small holes on the outside of this craft where this purple light was coming through. But these little rays of purple light coming out of this craft were so bright that it actually was hard for Stefan to look directly at the craft. And so his welding goggles were still on his forehead, so he pulled them down, put them over his eyes, and his welding goggles had a kind of tint to them, so it was like he was looking through sunglasses. And with those on, he was able to continue looking at the craft. And so through his goggles, Stefan is still just standing in the same spot where he first saw these craft, and he's watching this craft that's now landed 150 feet away from him, and he's fully expecting any minute for the pilot or pilots to come out of the craft and explain what's going on. But at first, nothing happens. And
so is paranormal, I assume that I figure paranormal was just like, I guess like normal and like the root word para and normal put together, I guess it'd be probably like out of the normal, abnormal. So I guess alien life forms would be considered abnormal to what is considered normal. So I guess that counts, but we usually only use paranormal to explain like ghosts, monsters, demons, you know, things that are not supposed to be real. I guess aliens are not supposed to be real, fictional as well, but yeah, isn't that just usually aliens are usually considered extraterrestrial, and ghosts and stuff like that are considered paranormal. So I that's why I wrote out aliens at first. I was like, it can't be aliens because that's not paranormal, but I guess it is. I knew it was aliens. Come on. I knew it was aliens. Ghost alien. Oh, it's ghost aliens. Aliens that were alive now are dead ghosts, but can still fly the ships because that's how strong and magical and powerful aliens are. That when they die, they can still do stuff. I figured it out. We don't even need to watch the rest, really. Just cut it right here. I know what it is now. Sharp noodle up here. Don't even worry about that.
Stefan is just standing there waiting for something to happen when he realizes he has his sketchbook in his pocket. Stefan liked to bring his sketchbook along on his prospecting trips because he liked to sketch things. And so he figured while he waited for the pilot or pilots to emerge, he would sketch the craft. And so for the next couple of minutes, that's what he did. And then after
that's an alien ship, all right. You notice the pattern here. Maybe they left a brand, a mark on them. Maybe that's like some kind of like serial code number or something, like alien serial code, or a barcode even. So when they come back to start some Independence Day takeover shit, they'll know who's who based off the barcode. But if this was advanced military technology, do you think they would be okay with you sketching pictures of it? They would confiscate that, maybe, and throw you in jail just for like you trying to share government secrets up in here. I don't know if that was the move, but we'll see how it plays out for him.
done sketching it, he put his sketchbook away, and then really nothing happened for about another 30 minutes. He just stood
What?
there, and the craft remained motionless. But
30
after about
minutes?
30 minutes of the craft having landed,
You just
it
waited?
opened. There was like a sliding door on the side of the craft facing Stefan, and it revealed the beautiful, bright purple interior of this craft. But from Stefan's perspective, because of how bright the lights were and how far away he was, he couldn't tell what was inside of the craft.
Right.
But Stefan's thinking, okay, clearly now the pilot or pilots are coming outside. And so Stefan felt really relieved, and he was just standing there waiting to talk to whoever was inside. But again, nothing happened. And so now, feeling just plain curious, Stefan decided, you know what, I'm going to walk over there and I'm going to yell into this.
Yeah, I was like standing there just waiting for 30 minutes. I would have just gone over and knocked, like, hello? Like, what up? You need help? Like, yo, new spacecraft, who dis? You know, like anything? Like, just, you waited there for 30 minutes?
Open door to the pilot or pilots inside and make sure they're okay. And so he starts slowly making his way across the rock face towards this craft and this open door. And when he gets about 60 feet away from the craft, he suddenly stops because now he can hear from inside of this craft the sound of two voices talking to each other. He can't really tell what they're saying, but very clearly there is communication happening inside of this craft. And so Stefan assumed that must be the pilots, and so he called out to them in English. And the second Stefan yelled out to this craft, the voices immediately came to a stop, and they did not respond to Stefan. And so Stefan is calling out to them in English, hey, are you okay? What are you doing in there? And when English didn't work, Stefan called out in Russian. He called out in German, Italian, French, Ukrainian.
Oh, right. He's the translator. I was like, wait, what? How's he know so many? All right.
All of those didn't work. He went back to English and just continued kind of.
I thought he was going to say like French because, it's Canada, France and Canada share usually language goes hand in hand, but no, every other language under the sun.
Calling out, trying to get them to please come out and talk to him.
Hello?
But he got no response and no one came out of the craft. And so at this point, Stefan thought, okay, I'm totally committed, so I need to keep going and make sure
you might
the
as
pilot
well.
or
What are you gonna
pilots
do?
are okay.
Yeah.
And so he continued walking closer and closer to this open door of the craft. And when he got about 10 feet away, he was suddenly struck by the incredible craftsmanship of this craft. He couldn't see any rivets anywhere on this amazing piece of machinery, meaning this craft appeared like it had somehow been carved out of one enormous piece of steel, which seemed totally impossible.
Right.
Also, Stefan noticed there were no insignia on the outside of this craft. There was no flag or anything kind of denoting who was flying it. There was really nothing on the outside of the craft. But Stefan just kept on going until he was standing right outside of this open door. He's only a couple feet away from it, and now he's looking directly inside, and he doesn't see the pilot or pilots. And in fact, because of how bright this purple light is coming out, even with his goggles, it's really hard to see what's inside of this craft. But he can clearly see inside there is some sort of panel in the back of the craft with lots of flashing lights, almost like a computer. And there were other kind of columns of light moving around inside the craft at different angles. But after looking in this craft for only a few seconds, the door suddenly slid shut. And then Stefan, without...
You're not worthy to come to space. You do not come in here. Get out of here.
really thinking about it, reached out and touched the craft. And the second he did that, two things happened. One, the hand that he touched the craft with, he was wearing a big welding glove, and the second he made contact with that craft, the leather glove began to melt. Not even catch on fire, it just instantly began to melt.
Oh shit, dude. Yeah. The actual photos of it. Hey, that thing toasted up, dog.
And so he began frantically ripping the glove off to get it off of him to avoid injury. And then the second thing that happened is the craft began rotating counterclockwise until this vent that was on the outside of the craft, one of the very few things that was on the outside of the craft that actually Stefan had noted in his sketch. He had drawn this grate that sat on the outside of the craft. this grate rotated around until it was aimed directly at Stefan. Now, to picture this grate, picture like a vent you would see inside of a building where air conditioning blows air out of, right? It's kind of like that same size, the size of a license plate on a car. And instead of there being vertical slats along the vent, like you would see with an air conditioning vent cover, on this vent, on this craft, it was like a checkerboard pattern with little buttonholes all over this vent.
Right.
And so Stefan is looking at this vent, and then suddenly something shoots through the vent, like an explosion that hits him square in the chest and lights him on fire. His shirt is literally in flames, and so Stefan is frantically trying to rip off his shirt. He throws it on the ground, he's stomping the flame, and as he's doing that, he looks up and sees this craft has somehow immediately shot into the sky and is now disappearing into the clouds. Now, Stefan had no idea what just happened. All he knew is his chest and his stomach now hurt tremendously.
Right.
But before he could deal with that, he developed this unbelievable headache. He suddenly felt so nauseous, and he felt delirious, like he was drunk. Trying not to panic, Stefan, who now is shirtless and badly burned, he ran over and grabbed some of his things, and then he began heading back into the woods to make his way back towards the motel. It would take him several hours of stumbling through the forest, stopping periodically to vomit, but he would eventually reach the highway, he would cross over, and he would make his way into the motel right around 4 p.m. And when he got there, he made his way into the cafe, and he asked the staff if they knew where the nearest doctor was. These staff members would later tell investigators that when Stefan came tumbling into the cafe without his shirt on, looking totally horrible, they assumed he was drunk.
Right.
But after talking to him, he didn't smell at all like alcohol. Instead, he reeked of this horrible sulfur smell. The staff would tell Stefan that the nearest doctor was 45 miles away. And so at this point, Stefan decided his best bet was actually to just get on a bus and go back to Winnipeg, where his family could take him to the nearest hospital. And so somehow, Stefan managed to make his way to the bus stop. He hopped on a Greyhound bus, he went to Winnipeg, and then his oldest son, Mark, met him at the bus stop and practically carried him into the hospital. The very strange checkerboard burn pattern found.
So this is like, I mean, there's been a few times where I've stopped here, but I feel like there's large chunks where I'm just mesmerized by this story, and I don't really have much to say about it, because it's not a situation to where it's like trying to guess what's going to happen, because it's like all pretty much being clearly laid out in front of you. And like, there's no real stupidity here, except for maybe, I mean, it was good that he sketched it and what have you. But like, if he thought it was a military aircraft, and it's that, you know, hush hush, no one's seen before, like really advanced technology, I don't think they would want you sketching that. Besides that, there's like nothing stupid that he's been doing. It's like, I'll kind of buy the book. It's just a very fascinating story here.
Found on Stefan's abdomen, where he claims this craft turned its vent and fired on him, were determined not to be thermal burns, meaning he didn't get them from something hot touching his skin like everyone initially suspected. Instead, they were determined to be chemical burns, but literally no one, doctors, scientists, government agencies, no one could figure out what chemical actually burned his skin. In fact, no one was ever able to actually identify what was causing all of these ailments that Stefan was complaining of.
Right.
From the headache, to the nausea, to the weakness, to these burns. And he was tested for basically everything, from radiation poisoning to very common ailments and illnesses, and everything came back negative. Experts would go out to Falcon Lake, to the area that Stefan described seeing this craft, and sure enough, they would find an open rock face, and right around the area that Stefan described was this circular burn pattern, as if something had been perched right there that shot some sort of exhaust into the ground, and the area around this landing site was determined to be highly radioactive, although it is assumed that the reason that area is radioactive is because there is a vein of radium that runs underneath the rocks near the area. However, what no one could explain away were the 3 identical pieces of what looked like metal, which actually turned out to be a very rare type of silver, that were located near this burn circle. Now, even though the Falcon Lake area was known apparently for having silver deposits up in the hillsides, this silver, these 3 pieces of silver, were not from the hillsides of Falcon Lake. This silver was heavily manufactured. Someone, something, some machine had manipulated the metal to bend and be cut in a very particular way. And all 3 of these pieces of very rare silver were highly radioactive. They would also find traces of this very rare type of silver that seemed to have seeped into some of the loose rocks that were inside of that burned out circle, almost like the silver had melted into the rock. But despite these pieces of evidence that do seem to suggest that Stefan really did see some craft land on these rocks, and despite the fact that the US government and the Canadian government both thoroughly investigated this case, and they were not able to debunk it, they basically said, well, something happened, but we don't know what. Despite all of that, Stefan and his family's lives were forever upended after this incident. Stefan was ridiculed and accused of lying and of being crazy, and his kids were unfortunately bullied at school. Shortly before Stefan died in 1999 at the age of 83, he was asked if he regretted coming forward with this story. And he would say, yes, I wish I never told anyone. But he would also say, at the time, he really felt like he had a duty to tell the world about what happened. Stefan never changed his story, and he never came out and said, I think this craft came from another world, another planet, another universe. He just said, look, I think it was an experimental aircraft. That's it. He also never made a dime on this experience. If anything, he lost money because he paid to write a 40-page pamphlet that explained what happened to him, and then he left all these copies on his porch. So if news people showed up or if nosy neighbors showed up and had questions, he would just point to the stack of the books and say, take one and read it. So that's going to do it.
I mean, wait, hold on, wait a tick. This is a real photo of the pamphlet. He says that he never, well, it's again like paranormal, to where it's like it technically doesn't mean that. It's just what we use it for. He says like I was never, and he never said that it was from another world or anything, but it clearly says right here, my encounter with the UFO. But what UFO stands for is unidentified flying object. So that literally could have been from Earth. A UFO could technically be some kind of flying aircraft of any kind that we just don't know about that could exist on this. Like if, let's say, the Germans created some kind of like crazy flying machine that no one's ever seen before, that, and then all of a sudden we just see it flying over the US, that would count as a UFO. So I guess technically that follows his story of he didn't say he was from another world. But like, I don't know, it's a little fresher.
But if you got something out of today's episode and
I mean, it's weird. Is it not weird? Let me reset the video here. We can discuss. So I mean, I one thing I was thinking about is like, I wonder if this would have happened with more modern medicine and or research and whatnot, technological capabilities. If we would have been able to find something or prove something, because you know they tested everything they possibly could. It's like, well, yeah, it was the 60s though. You know what I mean? Like, and it wasn't the leading edge of science and medical technology, so I wonder if we would have had better luck with that now. But the fact that I find very peculiar is that everything around the spot that was tested and then everything that was found, like the silver and everything like that, was extremely radiated and like just fucking packed with uranium, I think they said. Yet he tested negative for that. It's weird that, like, because when you think of aliens and shit like that, it like, you know, you think that they would have some kind of technology like way advanced, anything that us humans would use for power sources. So aliens using uranium to power their vehicles seems a little weird. So I kind of agree with, just based off of that factual information alone, though, in the 60s to have something that would be that powerful to just instantly shoot up or really go up in general. Like, 60s. Oh, I guess we did have. Yeah, that would have been more like World War One or earlier, I would imagine. Because if we had an aircraft that could fly and deliver a bomb of that proportion well enough, it would have been that advanced. But I feel like that. Yeah, no, most of our aircrafts, except for helicopters, have to go forward before they can go up. So just going straight up, that is a little advanced for 60s in general, 67. So like I don't even know if some other nation could have come up with something like that, because I was kind of like agreeing, because it was powered with uranium around like a couple years after World War II. Well, a decade or two later after World War II, I should say. Um, like, and I could definitely agree with his story of, I think it's just um, some other country experimenting with shit. You know, just some UFO Earth creation because it uses uranium. But shooting straight up, to be fair, he was distracted with being burned alive. um, so who knows if actually his memory was that clear, if it did go straight up, or if it maybe just kind of took off and then, you know, or something, you know. But yeah, that alone seemed way too advanced for aircrafts in the 60s, unless like the government really had some shit up their sleeves that they still have today, and probably even worse today that we don't know of, which is always a possibility. But yeah, I mean, if multiple governments, agency officials went out and checked the spot and confirmed, yeah, some shit went down here. Like, this is definitely weird. Then like something happened. Well, definitely something happened. I don't think the story is fake by any means, but I just don't. I can't see. I mean, maybe they will. I just can't really see aliens using human resources. Like, I mean, obviously, like any. Oh yeah, but that's just the planet in our solar system that would have similar. I guess if they could live on certain planets, it's it's a lot to speculate about. It's a lot of who the fuck knows. I don't know. I personally find it hard to believe that alien race would be using uranium to power their as a power source, but maybe. I mean, I'm sure there's certain planets, maybe in or out of our solar system, that has uranium too. I don't know. I imagine so. I might go look that up. Who knows? So I don't know. What do you guys think about the story? Like, does anything I'm saying make sense? I also got to look up the definition of paranormal, see if those root words together mean something that technically could be aliens. Because again, that's not what I think of when I think of paranormal. But I guess that technically, just like UFO, falls under the correct usage of the word. Just I don't know. It's just what we use it for, but what we usually use it for, I should say. Anyways, that's a cool story. I like that story. It's really cool, really cool. And I'm glad that they weren't tied to his fucking hand. It was just the way the picture was framed. That was just a little gross. But yeah, that's very cool. Thank you very much for joining me here today. This is our 25th Mr. Ballen story that we listened to so far. At least that I've reacted to, because I think I did 2 or 3, at least 2, if not 3 videos that I listened to, or that I watched of Mr. B before this. And I'm sure we'll get to them eventually. And I might do a reaction to them again, just in case I forget which ones they were. I think they are still red barred. Well, not so I should know, but just to recatch on the stories because they were fucking crazy. But yeah, number 25. How the time flies. So thank you very much for joining me. I will see you in number 26 next time.